one of the implications of the fact that texts don't have any inherent meaning, and the fact that we have to generate the meaning in our own heads, and the fact that we can only generate that meaning based on our own experiences with and understandings of the agreements about language, one of the implications of that is that meaning is going to be different from mind to mind as we generate things. Like the poor young man at KFC who had no idea why I was getting upset. His generation of meaning was different from mine. And so we're already having to, in a sense, negotiate with the text just to try to produce any meaning at all. If we want the text to generate a meaning, we're bringing our experiences and our understanding of language to bear on the text to generate that meaning. So I refer to that as in a sense, a negotiation with the text. But at the same time, we're also being driven by some intuitive desires. If the text is authoritative, or if we believe the text is inspired, if the text is meaningful to us, our intuitive cognition is going to play a role in how we are able to generate that meaning. And the meanings that are going to make the text most meaningful and most useful for us are the ones that are going to bubble to the top. And so subconsciously, we're negotiating with the text as well. Our subconscious mind is trying to figure out what will make this text meaningful, or what will make this text useful. And the people who composed the biblical text were writing because they wanted these texts to perform certain functions that usually are totally irrelevant to what we're worried about today. But for people who believe it is inspired, for people who want to leverage it authoritatively, it needs to mean something useful or meaningful. And so subconsciously, frequently, sometimes consciously, they're going to negotiate with the text, and they're going to try to come up with something that makes it meaningful and relevant and useful to us today. So on a few different levels, I think we are negotiating with the text.
It is the truest form of love that I have found. Do you believe in hope? 'Cause I am hope.
Welcome to the Deconstructionist Podcast. I'm your host, John Williamson. Welcome back to the podcast. We have a big one today. I've been super excited to release this one. I was super excited to record it. This is a gentleman who was recommended to me by a friend of the podcast, Jay Baker, and instantly got hooked on his videos. He is not your average academic, I would say. Obviously, just an incredibly brilliant guy, but has this really crazy social media presence, and has used social media to reach out to folks of younger generations, probably, you would say, and has done so incredibly effectively in an effort to combat misinformation, and it's just super fun watching him do it. So quickly became a fan, plowed through all of his videos, and obviously, and we talk about this on the podcast, it's hard to boil down really heavy subjects into 1-2 minute, videos, like little soundbite clips almost. But he does a great job of also supplying, additional resources that you can check out, and really falls in line with what we've been trying to do with this podcast for years, which is, try to encourage people to really dig into it themselves, and just, not take something at face value, and do the research and look into it yourselves. And so he really does a great job of sort of facilitating that, giving you a nibble, but then kind of showing you some places you can go to look into it even further. And really, is one of the few voices out there who actually has the pedigree to, as I said, kind of combat a lot of this misinformation, because as we all know, anybody can put anything out on the internet, but it doesn't necessarily make it true. So we got to be real careful. But Dan does an awesome job, and it's super fun. His motto is data over dogma, which I love. So he takes a very historical approach to following the data wherever it leads. No preconceived notion, or he's not working backwards and taking a theory and trying to make the evidence fit. He's just following it wherever it goes, and takes that very seriously. So this one was a ton of fun. Kind of got to do just sort of some, random questions that I get a lot through the podcast, and just kind of throw them at him. And and let him go. So it was a ton of fun. So Dan, his background, he got a bachelor's degree in ancient Near Eastern studies, then went on to get not one but two master's degrees, one in Jewish studies through the University of Oxford and another in biblical studies, and then got his PhD in theology and religion. He just now went independent based on the popularity of his social media presence, but worked for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints as a scripture translation supervisor, and worked for Brigham Young University as an adjunct instructor of ancient scripture, but now has a podcast out and is working on other projects. So we'll put all those links in the show notes. Data Over Dogma is the name. But you can find Dan all over social media, like I said, as well, primarily TikTok and YouTube and Instagram. Some really great videos. He's got tons of videos up there on all sorts of topics. So check it out. And other than that, I think you guys know the gist, right? So check out www.thedeconstructionist.com. You can find all of our social media, links to our Patreon, links to our social media, our blog, all that good stuff. You can stream our entire back catalog of episodes directly through the site if you wish. If you're technology challenged, you just got to click play on the website. So try to make it easy. But other than that, let's get to it. This one was super fun. I give you Dan freaking McClellan.
This water I am treading is now my home. So never take what you have for granted.
Welcome to the podcast. I am so excited to have today's guest on. Welcome, and thank you so much for taking some time out of your day, Dr. Dan McClellan.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So to jump into the interview, tell listeners a little bit about your background and how you got into the work that you do today.
Yeah, happy to. I was never really much interested in religion growing up. I tell people that I was basically agnostic through most of my life. I am an adult convert to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, so I was baptized when I was 20 years old, and a year later I left to serve a full-time proselytizing mission in Uruguay, where I learned a type of Spanish we call Castellano, and I also started reading the Bible. Someone gifted me a Spanish translation of the Bible that included the Apocrypha, as well as a Spanish Bible dictionary, and I just fell in love with the literature, the languages, the cultures that I was finding about in the Bible. I had heard some of this stuff in the past. This was my first opportunity to really dive deeply into it, and things in the Apocrypha particularly I fell in love with, particularly 1st and 2nd Maccabees. Learning about that history was something very new to me, and it just fascinated me. And I just really, really enjoyed learning about this ancient culture that we had so much access to. And I discovered that there was a new major at BYU, which was basically the only school I was going to be able to get into. And I had already been kicked out of one university in northern Colorado, so I had a 0.29 GPA. And I figured maybe they'll let a convert return missionary in, and they didn't the first time around for this new major they had called Ancient Near Eastern Studies. But I was able to finagle my way into the back door by taking some other classes and transferring in. But I did a bachelor's degree in Ancient Near Eastern Studies. I emphasized Biblical Hebrew, and then I minored in Classical Greek. And then went away to Oxford and did a master's degree in Jewish studies there, where I studied the Septuagint and textual criticism. And I wrote my master's thesis there on anti-anthropomorphism and the Septuagint translation of Exodus 24:10. And then went to another school in Canada to do a master's degree there in biblical studies, and got a job working for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints as a scripture translation supervisor, and was able to do that full-time job and also complete a doctoral dissertation that got me a PhD through the University of Exeter. And being able to study the Bible for a living has just been a dream of mine ever since I was walking the dusty roads of Uruguay back in 2002, 2003. So it's been something I've really loved doing. I've always had a critical eye for it. I've always been very curious, wanting to know what's really behind these texts. And I've never been really convinced by a lot of the dogmas that people have used to try to share those texts and try to convince me of what's going on behind the text. And I have always tried to combat the spread of misinformation, particularly online. I had a blog many years ago. I was friends with a number of biblical scholars and archaeologists and things like that, and we would get together and interrogate new finds where people said, they just discovered this artifact or this inscription, and we'd get together and talk about why we didn't like it. And but with TikTok and other social media platforms, I'd never really thought about doing that kind of thing on there, but I started to see TikTok videos being shared on Facebook and on Instagram and Twitter that were overlapping with my area of expertise, but it wasn't coming from scholars. It was coming from lay people and interested students of the Bible and religion. But there was a lot of misinformation that was being shared. And so I thought I would go lurk for a while and see what was going on TikTok beyond just teenagers dancing and Korean kids disrupting Republican presidential campaigns, which, I was perfectly happy to let them do their thing. But I wanted to see if there was actually a lot of content that was being created that overlapped with the academic study of the Bible and religion. And I saw that there was. But I didn't see many credentialed experts there who call in balls and strikes and there to share the data. And so I thought this is a niche I could fill. So I got myself an account and I started responding to videos and to claims that were being made, and really enjoyed it. It was phenomenally awkward at first. I had never recorded myself on camera before, so I still don't like seeing myself on camera, but it started to gain some attention, and as I was responding to the audience and to what people are liking or not liking, what questions they had, what kind of topics they wanted to see me cover, kind of organically just developed this brand, I guess you can call it, where I try to put data over dogma, and I confront the spread of misinformation about the Bible and religion, and also try to increase the public's access to the academic study of the Bible and religion. One thing I've noticed is that a lot of the misinformation I see out there is a product of people being exposed to outdated scholarship only because it's in the public domain and is freely available online. And so that's really all a lot of people have to work with. So I'm trying to democratize access to what's going on now in the study of the Bible and religion, and try to see if we can't put a dent in a lot of the misinformation that's being spread out there.
Yeah, I think that's what initially drew me into your work to begin with, is the fact that you're able to use this technology in a way that you don't often see with professors, or scholars in the field. You think of scholars as these stuffy older guys, wearing blazers with elbow patches and hanging out in the archive somewhere and writing. You don't often think of professors or scholars as individuals who are engaging online, who sort of dress like us and use social media to their advantage. So I think that's exceptionally cool, and I think that draws a lot of people in.
Yeah, I'm trying. There aren't a ton of people like that. There are a few professors who've hopped on TikTok and Aaron Higashi is a great example, for instance, who's a wonderful scholar and I think does really great videos. But yeah, there's not really a template for this. And so hopefully we're developing a bit of a template. I know there are a lot of scholars in the field, because I've talked to them, who would love to see more of this. Some of them are a little nervous about trying to do it themselves. Some are trying to do it themselves. But yeah, I think this is how a lot of the younger generations are consuming their content and are engaging in the public discourse. And so we need to be out there if we hope to combat all the misinformation, because that misinformation is going to be spread whether we're there or not. And I think we have folks like Bart Ehrman who have, to some degree, been very public facing, but they're publishing books. They're not engaged in a lot of the more easily consumable stuff that we find on TikTok. So I'm trying to fill that gap until we can get a critical mass of scholars in here to be able to really make a push against all of the misinformation that is out there and hold that line, so to speak.
Yeah, I think there's no mistake in terms of why your social media platforms have taken off in the way that they have. I think it's just a really, good way, and obviously, it's where this generation is at. And I think they get a lot of bad rap too. I think a lot of, specifically the millennial and whatever the generation is after that, kind of get a bad rap of being sort of lazy and entitled, and I'm sure to some degree, every generation are those things, but they're also very curious and very smart and hungry for information. And I think you do such a good job of meeting them where they are. And I think, again, I think there's no mistake in regards to why your channels have taken off in the way that they have.
Well, I appreciate that. It was certainly a surprise to me, but a pleasant surprise for me. I've appreciated. I get messages every day of all kinds. A lot of people not fans of me. A lot of people who are fans of me. A lot of people appreciate that there's somebody who is speaking to the public to try to disabuse the public of a lot of the conventional wisdom that is not really based on much data. And so I'm glad that I'm able to be there, and that whatever it is that allowed me to gain purchase, kind of get a toehold in the public discourse, I'm really glad I was able to stumble across that. And I've heard a lot of people talk about what it is, what reason there is that my account has become popular. And I don't know that anybody's, I certainly don't know what it is, but if I had to guess, I guess maybe I have a way of kind of breaking things down, deconstructing them in a way that's a little more digestible for people, so that someone who's not used to the terminology, and I still get this wrong in a lot of ways. I'm working on a book right now, and my agent is like, "You got to stop using that word, man." There are lots of words that I use that are, $2 words that I still need to work on that. But evidently, I'm able to speak in ways that resonate with folks who are not used to hearing from people in my field. And maybe that's all it takes. Maybe there's something else to it. It's certainly not my looks. That's the one thing that I know is not contributing to my growing audience at all.
Well, don't sell yourself short.
At least I do get a little bit of attention with the apparel that I wear, and a lot of people are fans of the beard now too, which I'm glad to hear.
And that's a
Prescription products require completion of an online medication consultation with an independent healthcare provider through the LifeMD platform and are only available if prescribed. Subscription required. Individual results may vary. Additional restrictions apply at lifemd.com. Read all warnings before using GLP-1s. Side effects may include a risk of thyroid C-cell tumors. Do not use GLP-1s if you or your family have a history of thyroid cancer.
If you've struggled for years to lose weight and have given up hope, did you know you can now access GLP-1 prescription medications through LifeMD? LifeMD is now offering eligible patients online access to GLP-1s, the breakthrough prescription medication that can help you lose body fat and weight. Listen to what people are saying.
I've been able to live my normal lifestyle, and I've lost 20 pounds already. Changed my life.
I wasn't expecting it to shut off the food noise. This was life-altering, and if I can do it, I feel like anybody can do it.
And here's the best part. Your insurance may cover 100% of the cost of your medication. So go to trylifemd.com to have your eligibility checked right now. Get started today at trylifemd.com. That's trylifemd.com.
That's another thing that's kind of unique to you, is the fact that another thing that people probably don't think of when they think of academics is you have this amazing talent in the area of art as well, and you've featured some really cool drawings and art that you've created on your channel.
Yeah, I think people would be surprised if they understood that a lot of academics are fans of comic books, are weightlifters, are artists, have played professional sports, this kind of stuff. But most of the media through which academics communicate, you don't see that side of it. And so with social media, it's a little easier to pull back the curtain and let people see a little more of you. And so I think it's a surprise for people to see that, we're just like everybody else. We love comic books. We love, I know some unreal musicians who are biblical scholars who I've got a friend who makes fuzz pedals for professional musicians. Like that's a little side gig that he does. And many of them are phenomenal guitarists and musicians of all kinds. And so, but, they don't get to talk about that kind of stuff a lot in books and in academic articles. And so hopefully as more scholars are getting onto these social media platforms, there's an opportunity to learn more about them and see. And Twitter's a great place for it as well. A lot of my friends are on Twitter, and if people just want to go see how diverse and how interesting biblical scholars can be, Twitter's a great place for that as well. There are a lot of them are a lot more comfortable with Twitter than they are with TikTok.
Yeah, with Twitter, you could probably stay slightly more anonymous, I think. One of the things that I've really kind of latched onto that I've heard you say on your social media channels, I've seen it on your hoodie, is this idea of data over dogma, which I love. My background is in history, and that's very much the historical approach, the historical method, which is to follow the data wherever it leads, instead of starting out with this, with your endpoint and trying to work backwards. You follow the information, and wherever it leads, then you create your conclusion based off of what evidence and what data you have. Talk a little bit about that, and were there any things that throughout your studies that you followed the data and maybe you landed in a different spot than maybe you thought you would, or maybe it changed your opinion of something based on where the data led you?
Yeah, there have been a couple things like that. In fact, just the other day, I was thinking about two of the things that I've talked about on my channel a lot are actually positions that I pivoted 180 degrees, and earlier in my career, I absolutely did not have those positions. So my second master's degree, I initially started it to write on the concept of monotheism and the development of monotheism, and I was going to date it around the exilic period. And this was somewhat related to the academic consensus. I was going to try to bring cognitive linguistics to the question in order to provide another argument for it. But the deeper and deeper I got into it, the more I realized that the position I had was not making sense of the data. And I changed my thesis topic from monotheism to the conceptualization of deity. I was like, we can't even talk about monotheism until we know what a God is according to the biblical authors. And the deeper I got into that, the more I realized that there is anything like monotheism anywhere in the Hebrew Bible. And later I realized I don't think it's even in the New Testament. So I went from thinking monotheism was something that arose in the exilic period, and I was going to set out to prove it. And by the end of that degree, and I think by the end of the degree that followed, my doctoral degree, I became fully convinced that monotheism is not in the Bible at all. And so now that's a position that I hold, and someone who just knows me from TikTok, who sees a handful of those videos, it's very easy to just be like, oh, this guy hates the Bible, hates religion. He's just going to say there's no monotheism. And it's like, no, that was something that I struggled with for literally years. And I wanted to show that this is where monotheism begins. And the date kept getting pushed back. And I did not want to do that. And another example is Psalm 82, which is a fascinating psalm that is very mythological. It discusses the divine counsel. And for a lot of scholars, it is one of the oldest texts in the Hebrew Bible and may even predate the conflation of Adonai with El. And I think that's clear in Deuteronomy 32, 8 and 9. And I set out as a part of this research on the concept of deity and monotheism and the Hebrew Bible, I set out assuming that Psalm 82 was really, really old. And I wanted it to be old because that was going to help me with a lot of my discussions about the nature of deity and the divine counsel. But the more I studied Psalm 82, the more and more I became convinced that it's not that old. And so let's see, I started my second master's thesis in 2010 or 2011. In 2018, I published a paper in the Journal of Biblical Literature where I argue that Psalm 82 comes from after the exile. And so over the course of those 6, 7, 8 years, I completely changed my perspective. And now I'm one of the scholars who argues that it's one of the younger texts in the Hebrew Bible. So, and again, anyone who just knows my TikToks is probably going to think, oh, this is just part of his whole dogma. And it's really the opposite. This was something that the data dragged me kicking and screaming into the position that I hold now. And I, unfortunately, not everybody can see that whole process. And so it's easy to assume, oh, this is what's going on in there. And it's really not the case.
Yeah, and that's got to be problematic for you as an academic scholar too. You're creating these videos. The videos are not any longer than a couple minutes, but you're trying to sum up a concept or an idea or something that you had spent countless hours researching and that sort of thing. But you're summing it up into essentially an elongated soundbite. And people aren't seeing all the process and all the other information that you've used to come to that conclusion. And so, it's easy to judge based off of this, the short video snippet.
Yeah. And particularly if I'm doing a series or if I'm following up on an earlier video, a lot of times I'll kind of summarize positions. And, I've done 50 videos within the last year where I said, here are the sources, here's a book, and I put them up on the screen and I talk about all this. And then if I just have one video where I'm like, well, there's no evidence for this. And then I get 1,000 comments that are like, why don't you provide any evidence? Because not every video can be this full breakdown. I gotta eat lunch sometime today. I gotta go take care of this. So my video was shorter. So yeah, that's somewhat of a frustration, but that comes with the territory. I mean, I can't blame people for that. So it's frustrating, but that's on me. I've got to better curate the content that I'm putting out there so that I can produce stuff that's shorter and that's summarizing, but somehow helps people understand this is. I've got to point them in the direction of more data. So, yeah, those are navigating the kind of a lot of the pitfalls of social media content creation has been quite a growing experience for me. Something, if you said 2 years ago this is what you'd be doing by 2023, I would not have believed you for a second. But it's been an incredible process learning all about these content creation and how to make it work.
Yeah, and I think one of the other cool things that you do, though, along with the videos, is that you mentioned you'll put up sources and some other materials that they can research if they want more information. But you also have posted some online courses that you've done, on a number of very nuanced subjects where people can go and get a little more information, a little more meat, say than just watching the video. It's almost like the video is a teaser, and then if you want more, come join this class, which I thought was a really cool way to kind of supplement.
Yeah. And I had, that was not a plan that I had when I got into this, but as the content started gaining more attention, I had a lot of people asking if I had a podcast, if I was on YouTube, if I taught online courses. And so the answer was always no, not yet. And I tried to figure out how I could find the time to be able to dedicate to producing longer form content on YouTube and getting into a podcast. And the online classes, I think, were one of the first things I was able to do. I talked with a wonderful scholar by the name of Pete Enns, who does a lot of great work and has published some wonderful books. And he shared with me his model for teaching online classes that minimized the work I had to put into things, but made it easier to kind of disseminate a lot of information to a lot of people very conveniently. And so I started doing that. And that actually allowed me to quit my full-time job and do the content creation full-time, which is what I'm doing now. And so now I do have a bit more time to dedicate toward YouTube, and now have a podcast that's coming out. And I still do the online courses. The next one that's coming up, I don't know when this will air, but in May 11th, I'll be doing a course on the Divine Council, where I'll be talking in a lot more detail about the text that I mentioned earlier, and how each nation had their own patron deity, and these deities all sat on a divine council that was ruled over by the patriarchal high deity, and I'll talk about how that changed throughout the Bible. So yeah, I never got into this thinking I'm going to have all different kinds of levels of information that I'm going to be able to provide. But as I saw what the audiences were asking for and wanted, I was able to position myself to be able to kind of produce a number of different channels for that information. And yeah, there will be more coming in the future, hopefully, too.
John was young and driven with a heart of gold. Finished seminary, married, found a church he could go home. Made a living, giving dying folks a shoulder and a hand, until he told his leaders that he had some feelings for another man. And they said, John, you must go and take your broken heart and walk it to the door. We know you're hurting and you've been giving, but now you're damaged goods and you gotta give some more. John, we love you, but we can't love you. You must go. Jen could sing a song and channel the divine. Spent a decade sharing it and kept herself in line, until her eyes began to see the light inside the dark. Then the floor of all she thought began to fall apart. And they said, Jen, you must go. We didn't know your quest would lead you down this road. We know you're searching and you've been giving, but now you've wandered off and you gotta wander home. Jen, we love you, but we can't have you. You must go. Jane was born with skin darker than her peers. Spent a cycle telling them the reasons for her fears. No one seemed to know or care about the past. Then they showed her where she stood with every vote they cast. And they said, Jane, thanks for your time, but there's no room for you when there's power on the line. We know you're hurting, but we're not listening. And we'd help you out, but we don't have that kind of time. So go work harder and you'll all be fine. You must go. So John and Jen and Jane were on the streets without a home, abandoned by the ones supposed to love and keep them warm. Then a voice fell on their ears, so familiar to their soul. And he said, child, don't you go. I want your broken heart and your beautiful soul. I felt you hurting, I've seen you giving, and I'll stay right here till you have the power to stand. They may not want you, but I know they need you. So let us go. So come out, my people, the rejected and broken and turned away. Let us go and live out the plan, lead them into the promised land. So come out, my people, the rejected and broken and turned away. Let us go and live out the plan, lead them into the promised land.
Stay warm this season with Ariat Jackets and Vests, available now at Cavender's. Ariat's built for every adventure with cozy warmth and rugged durability. Shop the latest selection of styles for men, women, and kids at your local Cavender's or on Cavenders.com.